No one was supposed to find, not because it was hidden, not because the path to it was dangerous, though it was, in ways that had nothing to do with beasts or bandits, but because the sword had been waiting for 100 years, standing upright in a stone altar in the middle of a wasteland that both humans and orcs had agreed, without ever signing a treaty, to pretend did not exist. The orcs called the sword Vrak. In the old tongue, before the wars had carved new meanings into old words, the name meant something closer to the voice that remembers. Humans, when they spoke of it at all, which they did rarely and always in low voices, called it the Holy Blade, as if naming it something simple and reverent would keep it at a safe distance. It did not. This is the story of what happened when a man who was not supposed to be there touched a sword that was not supposed to respond. And how that single moment, one hand, one blade, one breath of purple light in the middle of a burning desert, ended a war that had swallowed 100 years and more lives than anyone had bothered to count. But before we get to the sword, we need to talk about the man. And before we talk about the man, we need to talk about the war. The war did not begin with hatred. Most wars don't. This one began with a misunderstanding so catastrophic, so perfectly timed to destroy everything it touched, that the surviving witnesses on both sides had spent a century trying to convince themselves it must have been intentional. Because intentional was easier to live with than the alternative. The alternative was that 100 years of bloodshed had started with a stolen sword and a lie that no one had the courage to correct. But that part comes later. What you need to know first is this. For as long as anyone alive could remember, the desert of Ashkorum had been a border. Not a border drawn on any map. Maps lied, and both sides knew it. But a border understood in the gut, in the blood, in the particular silence that falls over soldiers when they realize they have gone too far. To the west, human lands, farms and market towns, and a kingdom called Ashveld that had been at war so long it had forgotten what it was fighting for, only that stopping would mean admitting the cost had been too high. To the east, the territory of the Korum clans, 5 great orc clans who shared something rarer than alliance, shared grief, 100 years of it, deep enough to drown in. Between them, the desert. And in the desert, standing in a stone altar, carved with symbols that neither side had made and neither side could read. Vrak. Cassian had not planned to be in the desert. He was, by his own admission, a competent soldier, not exceptional, not the kind of man stories were written about. He had joined the army of Ashveld at 17 because his older brother Beren had already joined, and Cassian hadn't been able to think of a good reason not to. He had survived 15 years of intermittent war through adequate skill, genuine caution, and the luck that visits men too tired to take unnecessary risks. Beren had not been so lucky. Beren had been the kind of man stories were written about, tall and laughing, with easy courage that made others want to follow him. Beren had died 7 years ago in the Battle of the Red Crossing. After that, Cassian had kept fighting, not for king or country. He fought because it was the only life he still knew how to live. Because stopping felt like admitting that Beren had died for something that could simply be stopped. The scouting mission that ended with him captured was the kind of assignment that gets competent but not exceptional soldiers into trouble. 3 days east of the border garrison, following reports of orc movement near the edge of the desert. He had taken 6 men. He had come back with none, not because they had been killed, but because they had scattered in the chaos of the ambush, and he had run in the wrong direction, straight into the desert, straight into capture. Straight into the hands of 4 orc warriors who marched him deeper into Ashkorum without speaking to him, moving through the heat with the fluid ease of people who had grown up treating brutal conditions as simply the way things were. And then they brought him to the altar and to the orc who guarded it. Presence, the sense that the body occupying that space had been built for a world with more gravity than the one he lived in. Pelle verde floresta, deep as old moss in shadow, lighter where scars had healed across her forearms in pale constellations. Her hair was black, pulled back in a severe rope of a ponytail fixed with dark leather. Her eyes, when they settled on him, were amber yellow, the color of late afternoon light through glass, bright and completely unreadable. She wore armor that had been made for someone else. The leather was old, quality that didn't get made anymore, dark with age and oil and decades of use. The golden details at the shoulders and braces were worn smooth, where hands had touched them repeatedly. Someone had loved this armor for a long time before it came to her. She looked at him the way a person looks at a problem they did not ask for. Human, she said, not a question, not an insult, just an identification. Orc, he said, because he was tired and his wrists hurt, and apparently some part of him had decided this was a reasonable moment for his only personality trait to surface. The four warriors tensed. Ushna did not. One corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, something more like the recognition that a response had surprised her. Why is a human soldier in the sacred desert? Wrong direction, he said honestly. She looked at him with those amber eyes, and he had the uncomfortable feeling of being read, not his words, but whatever was underneath them. Take him to the altar, she told the warriors. He walks first. The altar was larger than it looked from a distance. Up close, the stone held light differently than the surrounding rock, as though it had absorbed more of it over the centuries and was considering whether to give any back. The carvings ran in concentric patterns from the base to the flat top where the sword stood, each line precise as a thought. The air around the blade had the particular quality of places where the same thing has been true for so long that the truth has settled into the ground itself. Vrakthul was beautiful. He had not expected that. Long and straight, dark metal that wasn't rusted dark, but the dark of something worked with enormous skill and then left to exist for a century in desert air that preserved everything it touched. Along the fuller ran markings matching the altar's carvings, finer than a human hand could have made. "Don't touch it," Ushna said from behind him. "I wasn't going to," he said, and then Bolrak tripped. Bolrak was 16 years old, which meant he was enormous in the body and approximately 7 years old everywhere else. He had been assigned to the rear of the escort because Ushna had learned, through 3 months of painful experience, that putting Bolrak anywhere near the front of anything resulted in complications. He was not clumsy, he was simply enthusiastic about existing. What he tripped over was a rock, an ordinary rock. What happened when he tripped was that he lurched into Cassian, who lurched into the altar, and Cassian's bound hands, extended instinctively for balance, connected with the hilt of Vrakthul. The light was purple, not purple the way a bruise is purple or a flower, purple the way lightning is white, sudden and total, and belonging to a category of things that simply are, without asking permission. It erupted from the blade in a column that went straight up into the desert sky, and for 3 full seconds, the Ashkarum had its own sun, and it was the color of something that had been sleeping for 100 years and had just been told it was time. The sound came after, felt in the chest rather than heard with the ears, the way the largest bells produce a note that is more vibration than sound. It moved through the ground in rings. In multiple distances, birds exploded into the air simultaneously, as though they had all received the same startling piece of news. Then the light faded, and the silence returned. Cassian looked at his trembling hands. Ushna had gone completely still. Her right hand had moved to her left wrist, to a strip of leather wrapped there, beneath which something small and metal caught the purple afterglow. And she held it with the kind of grip that wasn't about the object. It was about needing something solid. "What?" said Bolrak in a voice that had gone very small for someone his size. "Did I just do?" 3 days passed. In those 3 days, Cassian learned several things. He learned that desert nights were cold in a way that desert days gave no indication of. The temperature dropped with the sun and kept dropping. until the air had the dry, sharp quality of breathing through metal, and the stars above Ashkorum were so numerous and so bright they looked painted, arranged rather than scattered. He learned that Ushna slept less than anyone he had ever met. He would wake in the early hours, and she would be standing near the altar, not touching it, just standing close to it, the way people stand near things that have hurt them, too close for comfort, too close to look away. He learned that Bolrak asked an average of 47 questions per day. "Does it hurt when humans cry?" Bolrak asked on the second morning. "Orc tears are heavy. They hurt coming out." "It doesn't hurt," Cassian said. "Then why don't you do it more?" Cassian did not have a good answer for that. On the third day, Mirek arrived. She walked out of the eastern shimmer of heat on the horizon with the purposeful calm of someone who had known they would end up here and had taken their time about it. She was small for an orc, ancient in the way that certain things are ancient, not diminished by age, but distilled by it. Her right eye was cloudy, half closed. Her left eye was white, not the white of blindness, but a smooth, polished white, the color of river-worn bone, set into the socket as though it had grown there. She walked barefoot through the desert. The soles of her feet, when she stepped, made no sound. She stopped in front of Cassian and looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "You've been carrying something that doesn't belong to you." "The sword touched me," he said. "I didn't touch it." "That's not what I meant." She tilted her head. "What was the last thing your brother said to you?" The silence that followed had weight, real weight, the kind that presses on the chest. Cassian had not spoken about Beren to anyone in a very long time. He had thought around those words, the way you learn to walk around furniture in the dark, feeling its presence only when you stub your toe. "He told me to go home," Cassian said finally. "The morning before the battle. He said the war would end eventually, that I should think about what I wanted to do after." Mirek nodded, as though this confirmed something she already knew. "And now?" she asked. "He didn't come back, so now I don't think about after." Behind Mirek, Ushna had emerged from the tent. Her hand was on her left wrist again, fingers pressed against the leather binding. "Show him," Mirek said. "Beam." Ushna crossed the distance between them, 12 steps on ground that seemed to take effort to cross, and stopped in front of him, close enough that he had to look up slightly. She unwound the leather from her left wrist. The fragment was roughly 3 fingers wide and 2 long, a shard of dark metal with one straight edge and one ragged edge where it had broken from something larger. It hung from a thin cord of twisted sinew, worn against the skin for so long that the cord had left a pale impression in the green of her wrist. Even from this distance, Cassian could feel it. The same low resonance the altar produced, but quieter, a note at the edge of hearing. "My father wore this until the day he died," Ushna said. Her voice was flat, controlled in the way of someone who has practiced controlling it so long. The effort has become invisible, but not quite invisible enough. "He told me it was a piece of Vrak Thul, that it had broken from the blade during the battle 100 years ago, that our clan had kept it because the shamans said it was important, that one day—" She stopped. "What?" Cassian asked. "One day it would fit back where it came from." She looked at the fragment, not at him. He believed that. He died believing the war would end in his lifetime. He was wrong. How did he die? Her amber eyes moved to his face, slow, measuring. "The Battle of the Red Crossing," she said. 7 years ago. The sound the desert made in that moment was nothing. Total silence. The kind that comes when the world understands something significant has just been said and gives it room. "My brother died there," Cassian